Every hero's journey starts with a call to step out of the known and into the unknown. And right now, I think HR is getting that call. AI is changing work, organizations are transforming, and HR can either cling to the role that has always been or step into something bigger. Because maybe the threat isn't AI, it's our refusal to change. My guest today is Tony Dina. He is a former corporate tech leader turned depth coach. He helps leaders step into the uncomfortable places where real transformation happens. Today, we're talking about the hero's journey, leadership, and what it really takes for HR to lead people through the unknown. Trust me, this was a mind-blowing podcast for me, so I learned a lot. I know that you will too, so let's dig in. Welcome back to the Human Capitalist Podcast. I am your host, Trent Cotton, and I know normally we start with current events with me and the guest kind of riffing, but I want to get away from that agenda for a hot minute because I've got Tony on, and I am just really kind of anxious to get started. So I don't want to do current events, Tony. Let's just dive right in. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell a little bit about what you do, because I think it's going to set the context for our conversation.
Yeah, so I was an accidental technologist with a Master's of Fine Art in Painting, an MBA that helped me get credibility, and spent nearly 30 years in corporate America in a high-tech environment, leading teams, working with data and analytics. And then I had a pivot, and I realized that the true passion was enabling others. And for your audience, this is a calling. So I became a Jungian depth coach. And for those of you who don't understand what depth coach means, is the answers come from the inside, and it's hard questions. And I think, Trent, if I read you right, and I've been listening, you like hard questions.
I love them. Love them. And it's funny because in the book, The FutHRist, one of the 5 mindsets is the coach. And I actually open up the chapter, and any video that I do, like, before you nod your head and go, oh, I've got this one, I'm defining coach very differently. And I define it as the person that lives in the uncomfortable. And I think that's why this topic and your experience is so timely.
Yeah, Trent, I think one of the things that I liked about your perspective is you help people find their edges. And I think that's what a good coach does.
Well, I appreciate that, because for years, teachers, my parents, even some of my early managers, they were always, we got to rough out your edges. But, sometimes you need a little bit of edge to get things done. Maybe not as direct as I have been early in my career. Apologies to all those that I led before. But, you can soften it I just kind of feel like you can soften direct feedback and coaching to a point where it's ineffective.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree on that.
And
what do you mean by finding the edges, Trent? There's one thing about being edgy, like being confrontational because you're afraid and you want to distract. I had a very interesting conversation with a client around a Tasmanian devil. Remember the cartoon?
I am laughing internally because my nickname was Taz.
Yeah. Well,
and I didn't, just for those listening, we did do a prep, and I promise you that did not come up. That was not a setup. But whenever I would get really hyped or really angry about something, that my stutter would come out, and I was just like tearing things up, metaphorically, of course, and stuttering. And so people call me the Tasmanian devil.
Well, Taz is a great, character from Looney Tunes. And what I think when people identify, at least when I identify with it, it's because it's a path of destruction, that there's such a terror that we are trying to keep people away. And if we destroy the environment, people stand back. So it's a way of creating safety. But that's not what I mean by finding your edge. Finding your edge is when you're on the top of the mountain with your snowboard hanging off the edge, and you go like, I don't think I can do a double black diamond. I just started last season. Yeah. That's the edge.
So it reminds me of one of my favorite leaders that I worked for whenever she took over the division, and we had our first one-on-one, and I had supported her. She was a client. So she worked on the retail side as a senior exec. And whenever she came over, I remember the first conversation. She says, let me just go ahead and just lay the groundwork that I define being a leader as making my team so uncomfortable that they're forced to grow and innovate. And she held to it. I mean, it's the first time in my career that I was ever given a project and I went to my leader and go, I think I'm beyond my skis. She goes, good, that's exactly where you should be. So it reminds me of that. I love that definition of kind of being on the edge. Now, I mean, you coach a lot of leaders, and we're going to get into your tactics in a little bit. But I'm just really kind of curious because, this whole topic about AI, everyone's focused on the technology. Not a lot of people are talking about the people transformation in your client work. Are you finding that you're kind of having to live in that middle?
Yeah, and one of the things that comes up is what we call the ampersand mindset.
Okay.
So you can say this is a human. This is a productivity gain, and the people are terrified. It's both. And so, if you're an HR professional, how do you embrace those qualities as you lead? AI is doing an incredible amount of innovation for how we think about things. And I've got people around me in tech that are creating HTMLs instead of PowerPoint because it's interactive. And they never imagined themselves doing that. But what happens when we give ourselves over and our ego is buried inside the large language model? What happens when we just generally assume that the first paragraph it spits out is right? We're deferring our judgment. And that's where I think the real edge is now in terms of leadership.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. This is the second conversation that I've had today about deferred judgment whenever it comes to AI. So I take that as a universe sign that I probably need to dig into that a little bit. Now, when we were prepping for this, you talked about the archetypes of coaching. Can you outline what those are and maybe a couple of examples of each?
Well, we were talking about archetypes from Carl Jung's description. So he spent a lot of time with the human fascination with stories, and stories across the globe are myths. Uh, Beings from godly beings. That's probably the best way to describe it, and how humans interact. And it's just a way to understand a pattern of energy. Not going woo woo on you, Trent. I'm just
Okay.
saying we have this emotional charge relative to our father or our mother. We're reacting to strong animus and anima archetypes. I'm not going to go all psychology on the audience, but it's suffice to say that when we think about our archetypes and how we behave, how we react, we need to take on these different energies, these different personas in order to be effective in our work. Sometimes we have to be nurturing, anima. Sometimes we have to be rule driven, animus. So for me, the archetypes are tapping into these ancient stories that we've all have access to and applying them in our everyday goal driven life.
I like that. I like that. So what are the four archetypes?
Well, look, we talked a little bit on before we got on four male archetypes: the magician, the warrior, the lover, and the king. Ironically, you've already enjoyed watching them when you watched the original 1966 edition of Star Trek.
Mm,
You probably saw the same thing reappear with Seinfeld, but in an inverted fashion. We're so fascinated with these different persona types and how they behave. The king for stability and order, the warrior for chaos and spontaneity, the magician for deep intellect and trickster energy, and the lover, of course, as you had mentioned, for relationships. All of those are things or qualities that we can, embrace and step into.
So what I guess if I'm listening to this go, okay, yeah, I can kind of identify with that. How I would imagine it's not are you one or the other, it's kind of this operating system of which one is needed for the moment. Is that accurate?
100%. 100%. So in the client work, we oftentimes try to identify, like, if you can score yourself, like, in this behavior, I would do more of this, and in that, I would do this. And you'll tend to see there's a preference. So once you take your ego out of the way, who's trying to like look good, like I'm really the warrior. Like, no, you're not. You're really
Right.
the lover, and the lover's fine. The lover's fine for leadership. You can lead from your heart. Once we get that psychometric information, you can really identify, like, I understand what this means and how I can apply it. And there are tough times, and that needs That needs the king for stability, and it needs the warrior for spontaneity.
Makes sense. And I don't know if it's just this pervasive interest or acclamation toward personality types that's been the hype for at least the last 2 decades. But I think that people are losing touch that you can be multiple things depending on the situation, and you probably should be. So we'll just pick on disc because I love disc. I'm a very high D. Like whenever I would teach it, I would always say that's an eagle. They like to be at 50,000 feet, and they can swoop in, but usually whenever they do, there's blood on the dance floor. I mean, that is perfect example, of kind of how I roll. Can I be an I? Absolutely. Whenever I'm on stage or I'm facilitating a workshop or, just certain types of work events, I can pull that I out, but it drains me a lot faster than just being my natural state. But I know when to pull them through. Do you find that people kind of struggle like this is where I feel comfortable? Everyone else needs to acclimate around me to make me feel better.
Yeah. In the psychology terms, it's called an inferior function. It's like,
Okay.
trying to button up your shirt with your left hand if you're right handed. You can still do it. It just feels weird. And the question is, if you get your arm in a cast, you're going to button up with the left and you're going to get good at it. And that's
Mhm.
all we're really talking about.
Interesting. Now, you
Mm.
actually did a webinar on what AI cannot see. Can you kind of walk us through that? Because you said that there are three different acts to this approach, and I found that fascinating.
Yeah. So the first act is it's an efficiency tool. So we have a long history of cognitive offload. Uh, let's paint it really simple. You make a list, you go to the grocery store. Why? Because you're never going to remember everything. And this is taking your memory and put it into a physical form. We can do this from a calculation perspective. You can add and multiply, 2-digit numbers. But why would you when you have a calculator? So
Right.
we have a long tradition on this cognitive offload, and you should use it. You should embrace it. It can write emails. It can correct emails. It can tell you when you're off brand and what you're writing about, whatever. But the trap is that you can believe that it's actually doing a really good job. And what it can't do, and this is what we describe in Act Two, is it's missing creativity, human judgment, and connection. And that is a uniquely human thing. So when we can sit back and reflect on the things that the tool can't do and that we've been abdicating to other places because it sounds good, there's an opportunity there. Now, the third, and I'm going to promise you this is going to feel uncomfortable for most of us, is our unconscious mind. The unconscious mind is the thing that talks to us in our dreams. It's that weird stuff. It's that moment where you realize, I shouldn't be thinking that. There's something in that voice that's trying to get your attention. When we can spend time exercising and listening to that, we do better. I remember a Jungian psychologist once telling me, if you don't take care of your demons, they go in the basement of your soul and begin lifting weights. And I see a lot of people who have got their back pressed up against the door because the demon's coming through.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's the opportunity.
And it's interesting that you state that. I'd spent some time early in life as a youth minister because that's what I thought I wanted to do. But I got
Mhm.
out of ministry because I realized the vast majority of people that come for help, they don't want help. They just want to commiserate with someone and sympathy. So I was like, let me get out of it. And then fast forward 20 something years and I'm in HR and I'm like, why am I talking to people about their childhood trauma showing up at work? Like, this is not what I wanted to do. I want to talk about strategy. I want to kind of be in that architect mindset, but there is something there. And when you were talking about the demons, I think, you know, going back to how we started, that's an edge conversation a lot of people don't want to get into, and especially HR because it's you're thinking HIPAA, all of these different things. But sometimes
Yeah.
the best way to, I wouldn't say fix, but at least address the behavior modification that's needed is to get to the root problem.
Yeah. The what comes up for me a lot is the hero's journey. Now, if
Mhm.
you're not familiar with Joseph Campbell's work, he went around the globe collecting the fairy tales and myths from different tribes, and he noticed a pattern. It's exactly what he learned from Carl Jung, and the fact that we go on an adventure, but the first phase of that, we're going from the known to the unknown, is the refusal of the calling.
Right. Yes.
There's so many people who sitting around and whining because they're refusing the calling.
Hmm. Well, and I think too, there's there's this natural aversion for everyone. I think it's just kind of how we're hardwired to avoid pain.
Yeah.
However, some of my best lessons and the most impressionable changes in my life came as a result of pain. Like maybe I'm just hard headed. I learned from pain better than I learned from pleasure. I don't know. I mean, is that normal?
Yeah, it is normal. So what brain sciences is teaching us, and this is called the free energy principle, is that the body wants to go to homeostasis. And the best way it gets to homeostasis is through predicting what the future is going to be. So the minute we step into the unknown, we're biologically we're working against our biology in that case. And that's where the edges are. Stepping into the unknown where it's all range of possibilities, but it could go wrong is where we freak out. That's
Yeah,
the word. And sometimes we
got it.
don't get a choice. Sometimes we got a parachute because it sounded like a really good idea because our brother was doing it. This is a personal story. And then we get to the edge of the doorway, and they say, "Don't hang on." They say, "Just put your hands here." And
Uh-huh.
before you know it,
You're
the guy
going
pushes you out the window because you wouldn't go.
right,
Wouldn't go.
and then you would have missed the experience had you not.
Yeah.
Yeah. S- So, what are you finding leaders are struggling the most with in the current environment? And follow up question to that:
Mm,
if an HR practitioner is listening, how do you coach someone beyond that?
yeah. So I hear a lot of mixed reviews in the tech industry where I spend a lot of time. The senior leaders are all paranoid that some young person with tons of AI are going to create $1 billion competitor without hiring any employees. So they don't have any of the OpEx.
Mm,
And so they're racing to fill the business process, whether it's manufacturing, HR, marketing, sales, even with some kind of AI enabled environment. The second thing that happens is that the mid-tier leaders are feeling under pressure because they're looking at the scared employees. They understand there's a mandate from above and they're trying to negotiate the middle path. And it's very difficult when we see compressions of leader to contributor going from 1 to 5 to 1 to 10 to 1 to 30, and 1 to 40 is around the corner. And what do you do with that? What do you do with the fact that you become a people processor? It's like a factory or McDonald's environment, and you're in high tech with, knowledge workers, white collar workers. And so the opportunity for our HR professionals is to hold the middle ground, hold the and. And that is recognizing that we are in a different age where efficiencies is expected. But what we're missing is the innovation that comes with human beings. I like to think of human capital as a profit center. We just think
mhm,
of it as a cost center. Imagine if you looked at what's the expression that came to mind last night? We shouldn't be goal driven. We should be gift driven. Trent, you have some amazing capabilities and I can see them. Sometimes you can't. If I can find an opportunity for you to apply your gifts to a certain problem, we all win. And I
mm.
think that's where HR professionals really ought to be honing and advising the leadership. Where are the gifts and what are the problems we need to apply them to?
I love that. I love that. Whenever I was in HR, I always try to position our department as the connective tissue and the central nervous system of the
Mm,
organization. So,
yeah.
information, there are things that we hear from employees and from middle managers that the C suite needs to know, but maybe we need to, no, you kind of have to figure out. Sometimes you need to empower the people to be able to say what needs to be said, but then sometimes HR needs to be the person saying, here's what your people are saying. You don't want to hear it. I'm sorry,
Mhm.
not really, but this is what we need to deal with. Um, but I love that you call out the human capital as a cost center as well, because I always define my role as being in charge of the largest expense and the largest asset producing revenue in the organization. And every decision I made went through that lens.
Mhm.
And to me, that's where the value is, and talking about coaching, being able to your point see gifts in someone, help them recognize it, and then step into those gifts like the transformation, the engagement, the productivity. Of course, all of that's great for the organization. So there's a benefit driving enterprise value. But on the intrinsic side, to just watch someone go, oh wow, I never knew I could do this. And this is fun. Like it doesn't feel like work. That to me is like that's the part of HR that I miss.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that comes up a lot is this nature of what our strengths are.
Hmm.
And it's easy for most of us, all of us, to dismiss it because it comes easy. Our strengths come easy. And we dismiss it because we have this taught lesson to be humble. But what if we really started recognizing it instead of, and by the way, this happens, I met coaches for women,
Hmm.
and they said the number one problem is receiving compliments. So what
That's my
she does, and
weakness.
I love this for everybody, is thank you for noticing.
You know, um,
Great
I
move.
feel like I'm in therapy, Tina. Tony, I'm thinking. Tina used to be a leader of mine, and she told me, and I mean, I was in my early 20s, and she says, "You have a problem accepting praise." I was like, I don't know how to categorize it. Like, I grew up with criticism, so like, I don't know how to say. So, what was the phrase that I should start saying? Thank you for
Thank you
noticing.
for noticing.
Interesting, and that doesn't come off as being braggadocious. Like, I'm so glad you noticed.
I didn't say it, you said it. Right?
Okay.
Man,
Yeah,
I so thank
I
you for
need
noticing.
something to be able to say because, like, I just internally I shut down whenever I get compliments. I don't know how to file them. There's no action. I mean, I don't know. It's like whenever people call and say happy birthday, it's like thank you. Like, where do we go from here? You know. So,
A very tall friend who's one of the smartest people I ever met. And he's so practiced at receiving the compliment of being really a genius. And he says, look, you never congratulate me on my height. That just was a birth thing. So it's the same thing. I'm being smart. I just am. I mean, whatever.
I love that. There's never anything wrong with a little bit of self-deprecation.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, and I see this a lot with athletes. So the difference between therapy and coaching in my world is therapy gets you to normal, but every parent wants their child to be normal, but they don't want them to be average. And every athlete doesn't want to be healthy; they want to be extraordinary. So the coaches work in the above normal category. It's a beautiful space to be in. So
Yeah.
if you recognize you've got certain strengths and you're trying to go to great from just good,
Hmm.
where do you need to go? What do you need to develop? Who do you need to be? I can remember this one very interesting conversation with somebody in their mid 20s looking for a new job. And when we started our coaching session, he said, look, I got all the interviews. I answered all the questions well. They nodded, they smiled, but I never got the job. And I said, how did you show up to the interview? Silence. How should you show up to the interview? More silence. What we'd worked on is a presence that was about service. Simple things like don't say, I can do this for you. Use we. How are we going to tackle this problem? Just those little subtle shifts put you in the center of the room, not as someone trying to be brought on board, but already willing to help. That's a big difference.
Interesting. And do you find that leaders are struggling a little bit because it's I mean, whenever I started my career, one of the jobs that I had while I was putting myself through school was working as like an analyst, I guess, for underwriting. And it was not uncommon to have a bank book thrown at you whenever you made a mistake. I mean,
Mhm.
one of the commercial lenders would come in and the bank books, while I was you know what telephone book, how thick those things were. I mean, that was the financials. And I remember one time one of the commercial lenders asking who ran the numbers on this deal. And I thought I was getting praise. This is why I don't like praise. So I raised my hand and he launched that book and like it knocked everything over on the bookshelf behind me. Um, So that was not right, but I kind of feel like we've over rotated so much into leaders have got to coddle, and I believe in psychological safety, but I think we're mushing up what psychological safety actually is. Are you seeing this being pervasive, or is it just
No,
things
I
that I've
think you're
seen?
right, and I think this is where HR gets stuck, because they are trying to make it easy to deliver a bitter pill, right? The message that we're going to go restructure. By the way, you had an interview and you've loved your boss for 2 years, but now you don't work for that person anymore.
Right. Yeah.
You'll love it. Um, you got to just honor it. You got to honor the suck. And you say, look, this is not easy. This is not what you signed up for. But I believe in you and I think you can rise to the occasion. There's a really classic model for getting people through transition, if you don't mind my sharing.
No, it was
One,
actually going to be a follow-up question, so you beat me to it. You beat me to
yeah,
it. Go
so,
for it.
yeah, the first thing you say is number one, here's what's perfect. Here's what's right with the current circumstance. We're not staying here, but this is what's good. And let's do everything we can to acknowledge what's really important and let's not ever lose that. The second stage is you say, if we stay with our status quo, we're going to have these downsides. We won't be nimble to the market. We have product issues trying to, as we're racing to add features, whatever that thing is. So you've got to and get the team to admit what those downsides are. We're not even talking about the solution or the new state. We're just talking about what's good about the present and what's not good about the present. The third is you introduce the new state and you immediately go right to where the risks are. We could really mess this thing up. It could have a huge damage. Now you're addressing what's in their heart. They'll feel hurt. They realize that there's not a Pollyanna, this is just going to work its way out. And you always end with if we get this right, there are going to be rainbows and unicorns. So, but if we don't acknowledge the suck in the middle, in that U-shaped curve, we've missed a huge opportunity because that is buried inside of the employees. And I talk about this with leaders all of the time. As a visual effect, I've used the changing of the seasons as a backdrop for the 4 slides needed to address those 4 points. Because we live in seasons. We think we're linear beings, but we're circular beings. And we live through cycles like the 4 seasons. So when we can see that echoed in the message, we're getting the full complement in our bodies and our brains and our hearts. So that's my recommendation.
I like it. And calling back to the hero's journey, if I'm thinking through any movie right off the top of my head that follows the hero's journey, they have that speech. And that climax moment of, whether it's Avengers that, they're about to go toe to toe with Thanos, I think was his name. There was a speech there. And I don't know if you watched it, but to me it was interesting. Like the last battle scene, the reactions verbally from the people in the theater watching,
Mm-hmm.
like they're like I love how you kind of like lay it out, because I think there is a way to tap into the emotion of fear, address it, but then manage it, you know? Um, Interesting. Now you've got me thinking through all the times that I've had those conversations that I follow off. I probably skipped a season or two because
Well, go Google the hero's journey and look for a diagram. It's a circle. It's a circle. The top half
mhm.
is the known. The bottom half is the unknown. By 3 o'clock, we're in the unknown. If you go around the clock in a clockwise fashion, in those challenges, and there's always 3. They're not physical challenges. Look at Harry Potter. The deep, deep challenges that he faced wasn't Voldemort. It was reaching inside of himself to say that there is a giant in me and I can stand up to it. Now, he needed the vision of his parents in a couple scenes for this emotional support, but that's exactly what goes on. The monster is never on the outside. It never is. We have the physical abilities. And what I love about leaders, HR professionals, young professionals, is they're a lot more capable than they're willing to admit. They just need a mentor, a wise owl, Obi-Wan Kenobi, to help coach that out.
That's a very good point. And you wrote a blog about non-dualism. So first, can you explain what that is, and then can you translate that into maybe what HR is feeling right?
Yeah, non-dualism is a concept that aligns to Eastern spirituality, which, you know, I love your concept, Trent, of the human capitalist, where because it really puts money and people in the same positive venue. But I'm leaning more on this idea of can we borrow concepts from Eastern spirituality like non-dualism and apply it to capitalism? And there's
Okay.
actually a post, I need to send this to you, Trent, where I've outlined 4 business benefits for that. But before I get into it, let me share what that actually means.
Okay.
In the land of meditation, we see ourselves as a subject and an object. I can see the candle from the other side of the room. But what neuroscience teaches us is that those light waves that are the candle itself are coming through sensors in your eyes, and the image is being formed in the middle of your head. Your conscious experience is your reality. The candle is you. And when we take this non-dualism perspective, what we're saying is there is no difference between the subject and the object. We're the same. You can experience this yourself. Go on a train and you can see that the world is whizzing by you. In one frame, you see yourself moving through space. In a different frame, you can see the space is moving around you and you're standing still. That is non-dualism. Now let's apply this to business because
Okay.
this is where the fun is. If you can take that mindset as a leader, then your team is no different than you are. You're just fingers on the same hand.
Hmm.
When you start treating people like yourself, they feel respected. They want to be included. They turn into a team, not a bunch of players. You get more out of them because they're willing to give it for the team. You can also look at non-dualism as resources. Imagine a senior leader who's looking at trying to marshal, I don't know, a brand new venture. You have resellers that have capabilities that have sold your products before. They have built a staff that could be an extension of your team. They're not on the outside. They're on the inside. Again, non-dual. When we see global events that occur, and we understand that maybe our participation in that may be an effect in those global events, we're stepping into non-dualism in a different way. And so we become less emotional and attached to these larger tectonic plate shifts. We see this more as a game,
Hmm.
a shift, a turn in the tail. And so those are some of the things that I think non-dualism can teach us about how we move through capitalism in ways that I've never heard or seen before. Hope that helps.
Interesting. No, it does. It does. Now you've got me. I haven't moved past the candle in the train. I'm going
Just don't
because,
bring the needle on the train.
yeah, I mean the whole train thing. I've often thought about it from a physics standpoint. So if the train is going 80 miles per hour, but yet I'm standing still, am I going 80 miles per hour, or am I like is speed? Yeah, useless things that I my brain kind of coggles around. So let's tie all this up in a bow. Looking forward into the future, what does someone who coaches leaders through change, what do they need to start doing today? Like maybe your top 3 pieces of advice.
Yeah. So I'm going to say number one, you have to ask yourself what the leader you need to be is. First of all, you want to change your business, you change yourself, full stop. If you think everyone else needs to change and you don't, you're not going to see any change. The second thing I would say is you have to recognize that people are going to struggle. And so sometimes your role is to be very directive, and sometimes your role is to challenge them in a way that they find the strength within themselves. And I would say the third thing about transformation is that we have to be really clear about what we want. You know, I used to think that life would be grand if I just got my goals. And now I say, throw the goals out. Have the vision and the goals will arrive. When we overschedule and overplan, it never turns out the way we expect. But if we can hold the vision true and others can join in, things show up. That's the fun part.
I love that. Well, I could not have tied that up in a bow any better. Where can people find and connect with you and just learn more about this?
Yeah, look, I have my company is called Crucial Canvas, just like it sounds. So crucialcanvas.com, it would be the website where you would go find it. It's called Crucial Canvas for a very simple reason, because everyone deserves to create a masterpiece of their life, and it begins on a crucial canvas. Their life is their masterpiece. Let's get started. I also blog on Substack, and it's a much different tone. It's a companion tone. So go to crucialcanvas.substack.com and read some of the things like the conversation before the conversation, going to empty, and a few other Easter eggs around this idea of crossovers between Eastern concepts and Western living.
Love it. Love it. Well, I've learned a lot. You're definitely going to have me thinking at 2:00 in the morning, probably still about the candle in the train thing. But I've learned a lot. I hope the audience has as well. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's been a real treat being with you, Trent. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, it is Trent Cotton, the Human Capitalist. I am so excited. I am working very hard to get the new book called The FutHRist out by September of 2026. Now, a lot of work to do, a lot of editing, but in this book, I go through the 5 mindsets that I think every HR professional is going to need in order to remain relevant in the age of AI. Those are the architect, the COO, the engineer, the scientist, and the coach. If you've read any of my other books, you know that it is going to be filled with a lot of stories, a lot of data, and it's meant to make you uncomfortable, but more importantly, it's made to make you evolve. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more, you can do 2 things. First, make sure that you go and click the link in the details and put your email in so that way you're updated for whenever the book drops. And if you're kind of curious where you stand on the 5 mindsets, you can go to trentcotton.com/FutHRist start here, or just go to trentcotton.com. There's a FutHRist tab, and then scroll down to the middle of the page and there's an assessment. It'll evaluate where you stand in each of the 5 mindsets. So I look forward to going on this journey with you, and I hope that you will register and buy the book when it drops. So see you soon.